I think Mississippi can be a good place to be a photographer just because I don't want to necessarily say the barrier for entry is low, but I feel like you're able to stand out more, especially if you work really hard and you have interesting work. Uh, Places like New York or LA or Chicago where there are people who are better or just as good, and just so many people trying to be photographers that I feel like when you're in a place like Mississippi, your work is able to stand out a little bit more. Um, and not necessarily saying that Mississippi doesn't have a great art scene. It does, but uh, I feel like getting into photography or the arts in general is just much more worthwhile because obviously there's not a whole lot of money in Mississippi for artists, but if you're taking on this journey, you have to be pretty serious about it. Kind of the first memories moving to Mississippi, which was I believe 2010. Uh, a lot of it was the heat, the kind of the smells from the farms. I really wasn't used to that. I grew up in Glen Allen, Virginia, which is just the suburbs, so we didn't have farms or anything like that. And I remember we had movers when we got there, so like I guess my family hired people to move, and so I went on a run. One, they just laid asphalt too, so like it was super hot. It was the summer, but then I go into this farm, and it was slightly intoxicating. Like I didn't know kind of what this smell was, uh, but it just kind of like gave me a really bad headache and like I don't know, made me a little nauseous. But I'm assuming it was some type of pesticide or Roundup or whatever they spray on the fields in South Farm, and cow poop. In my opinion, I think anyone can be a good subject for a portrait. Uh, I feel like a lot of people have a lot of interests, so I don't think it's necessarily like finding somebody. I feel like, or looking at their facial features or anything like that. I usually look for just interesting people. I mean, sometimes, obviously for commercial or conceptual work, you have to find talent or whatever, but for a lot of my personal stuff, it's usually just people I find interesting. Uh, Papa Chewy, uh, interesting enough, it's my friend's grandfather who lives in Mexico, was visiting. I met him a few times prior. Uh, I don't speak any Spanish, and he does not speak any English. So my friend was translating for us as we hung out. And so we bonded over Budweiser's and Marlboro Red cigarettes. And we were at one of their family's restaurants, and we were just, for whatever reason, having a good old time and not knowing a lick of any of our languages, native languages. But somehow, like, we sat there, had a great time, and I remember they were visiting a couple years ago, and I had asked if I could take a portrait of him, and he agreed, and it was in my apartment. I've been smoking a cigarette. Probably not the best thing for my landlord, but got a good photograph out of it. So, but yeah, I feel like that's the great thing about art in general, and even photography for me, is that I can communicate with somebody, even though we don't speak the same language. You know, even with the direction of where how I wanted him to sit or pose, like uh, you know, it was super fun. It wasn't like, you know, I knew what I was getting into. He knew what he was getting into. So like, it's just a good time. You know, as long as my subjects are happy with the way that I represent them, that's all I can ask for. So Justin Deer Skull was essentially just uh, my friend Justin holding this deer skull that was gifted to us by a friend, and you know we've taken it from Starkville to Tupelo and just have it hanging in our house right now. I think we were just hanging out, and I just wanted to practice something, but also like I always had this image in my head because I'm a weirdo. Uh, and that's how like most of my images are. I just, you know, I'm like asleep or whatever, or I just have an idea of something and, you know, I'll sketch it out or something. I don't think that I really have a style per se, uh, especially now. Definitely when I was developing as a photographer, obviously I'm always developing, but I've come to the realization that I don't want to kind of fit in a box, so I've been doing kind of things that normally, if you saw my past work, you would probably be like, this doesn't look like Kamau Bostic's work. Um, I think that right now I'm kind of experimenting, but also being open to doing very different things. A new work that I did was a self-portrait, which normally I don't like being photographed, even though I'm a photographer. The only time I get photographed is if I need a new headshot. But it's a self-portrait of me with a pink background, which if you see most of my other work, I use a lot of muted tones, very moody. Uh, if you were to say kind of cinematic images, I would say. Uh, but this has a bright pink background, very warm. Uh, so that's a hard question. Uh, I think me being open to like doing new things has really like helped me as a photographer and uh, explore new things, which is it's fun right now. A few of my core rules when it comes to my work, mainly my personal work, is to let the subject speak for itself. Um, Definitely allowing them to shine through the photo with uh, uninterrupted with my biases. I try not to do that. I help them. I direct them a little bit in posing, but I hope that I try and represent them very well in their character. I do like using tighter shots. I feel like for me as a portrait photographer that is important. There are times where you know maybe it's a more environmental portrait, and you know you have to you want to encompass their surroundings with whatever it is that you're trying to uh, represent, I guess, or about the subject. There's there's actually a guy, Derek Lott, who I was on a work trip and we went to his shop and he has all these machinery and like he used to be a F1 pilot or whatever and he's a super interesting guy. But he has like this huge shop, like the shop's like bigger than his house on his property, and so like that's the stuff that he likes to do. But he's just a bank. He's a banker, but this is what he does in his free time and spends all his money on, I guess. But I took a portrait of him, and I thought it was very important to get a lot of the machinery, and he has all these old like 60s and 50s like ads and like pinup girls and stuff like that, and like you can kind of get a sense of like what era he like grew up in and the things that he likes to do. And I think that the portrait that I took of him kind of shows, like, represents him in a good light. Young photographers just getting into the industry or getting into photography, I feel like if you do want to be successful, I feel like you need to do a lot of research. You need to find your audience, but also find something that you like to do, and you got to take it seriously. You can't just come out half cocked and just, be like, oh, I'll just shoot pictures or whatever, or it'll be fine. And like if you're in it just to make money, uh, and not to create the best images you can, then I wouldn't do it. But some people do. I don't think you'll wind up being happy, and then you'll start comparing yourself to others, and you'll just be miserable. But I think that that younger photographers need to really think about how they want their work to be represented and look like. I think a lot of them get caught up in, I want to be like this photographer, or I want to make this much money, or whatever. It's like all that stuff will come in time. But I think just like find something that you're really passionate about that hopefully you can make money in, but that you really enjoy doing. I found that because a lot of my family is from New York, and I had shows in Chicago and stuff like that, but I felt like Mississippi is just like it's a weird like underground artist collective. Like you'll be surprised how many artists live in Mississippi that are like really talented. I urge everyone to go out and just research some, Mississippi artists, some Southern artists, and you'll be thoroughly surprised at what they bring to the table in the art world.